G. Donald Adams, speaking on marketing and promoting interpretive programs.
Whether a person will visit a museum or support it in other ways depends in large part on what people are saying about it. Therefore, it is very important to every museum that visitors convey positive impressions to their friends. It is equally important that a museum say what it actually intends to say, both in its marketing efforts and in its interpretation efforts. Often, museums are not communicating what they think they are. For example, a specialty in 19th century American art may be claimed by a museum which in the last 3 years has engaged only 18th century European special exhibits. Maybe an open-air museum emphasizes 20th century Midwestern agriculture in its marketing communication, but all its special event weekends have been antique automobile meets. It is not unusual for a museum to communicate one message in what it says about itself and another in what it actually does on site. Visitors anticipate their visits based on what they've heard from their friends and seen in the media and what they have seen in the museum's own literature and advertisements. When visitors are on premises, these expectations sometimes are not met. Although the visit may have been worthwhile or even enjoyable, they leave with a sense that their expectations were not fulfilled. Sometimes they convey their disappointment to other people, influencing them to not visit. We are going to discuss the process by which these visit expectations are created, and we are going to touch upon how we can determine if they are being met and what we can do about it if they are not. We'll begin with the information that people are exposed to before they visit. We will refer to this information as pre-visit messages. There are 3 types of pre-visit messages: word-of-mouth publicity, media publicity, and marketing communication. Every person who comes through a museum's door has been motivated to do so by one or more of these 3 types of pre-visit messages. Word-of-mouth publicity is simply what people are saying about a museum. It is based on their impressions. Sometimes word-of-mouth publicity is communicated by someone who has never visited the museum, but has heard about it by word of mouth, or by a media story, or by the museum's own marketing materials, such as its advertisements or publications. For example, did you see that ad for the XYZ Museum? I didn't realize they charged an admission fee. This is a word-of-mouth message that might be communicated by someone who has never visited. Although such messages can build an awareness of a museum, word-of-mouth publicity communicated by people who have visited, who know what they are talking about, based on personal experience with the museum, is perceived as being more credible and is more influential. In fact, of all the types of pre-visit messages, a visitor's favorable word of mouth is the most influential in motivating people to visit or even contribute to a museum's financial needs. The word-of-mouth publicity process operates in 3 steps as shown in this model. Pre-visit messages received through friends, the media, and the museum itself create expectations that motivate a visit. This may be a first or a repeat visit. When visitors arrive at a museum, they are exposed to a wide variety of on-site messages that either do or do not meet these expectations. The extent to which the overall visit experience falls short of, meets, or exceeds these expectations determines the impressions the visitor will communicate by word of mouth to other people. For these other people, this word-of-mouth publicity is a major influence in their decision to visit and in the benefits that they expect. This pre-visit, on-site, and word-of-mouth communication cycle operates continuously, playing a key role in shaping a museum's public image. Because this process is continuous and is subject to many uncontrollable variables, a museum's public image undergoes continuous change. Pre-visit and on-site messages that are as consistent as possible will give stability to a museum's public image. One way to develop pre-visit and on-site message consistency is to be sure material provided to the media accurately represents what the visitor will actually see and experience on site. A museum should not create expectations that cannot be fulfilled. For example, by releasing photographs of artifacts that are not on exhibit, the museum can set up expectations that cannot be met in any way. Likewise, a program emphasis described in news releases should be consistent with reality. For example, a museum's appeal to children should not be emphasized unless children actually do respond well to the museum. Media stories that usually are most influential with the public are those that result when reporters visit the museum and write their own material based on their own impressions. As with word-of-mouth publicity, the accuracy and tone of the reporter's impressions can be influenced only by making sure that what is promised is actually offered on-site. Of the three types of pre-visit messages, the only one that a museum can control is its marketing communication. To be productive, marketing tools such as advertisements, promotional publications, and membership promotions must clearly establish the museum visit as a way to attain benefits that a prospective visitor is actually seeking. All marketing messages promise benefits. For example, this Colonial Williamsburg advertisement promises that a visitor will receive personal attention. Another Williamsburg ad promises an environment that is historically accurate. Enjoyment, status, relaxation, intellectual stimulation, escape, and an environment which can be depended upon to be pleasant and safe are other benefits that may be sought by a museum visitor. In addition to associating the attainment of appealing benefits with a visit to the museum, prospective visitors must perceive the cost of these benefits to be reasonable in terms of the amount of time, trouble, and money that is required. A person will be motivated to visit only after the pre-visit messages have successfully aroused an expectation that in doing so, one can attain desired benefits. Everything that a visitor is exposed to during the visit, I will call on-site messages. They include museum support personnel, such as ticket attendants and security guards, the property itself, its attractiveness, cleanliness, and orderliness, the amenities, such as parking, food, and shopping, the collections, and the interpretation of its materials. Cultural anthropologist Nelson Grayburn believes that museum visiting is a somewhat burdensome experience. Visitors must ask, do I start with the gallery at the left or the one at the right? Do I read each label or pass quickly to that interesting gallery ahead? Where are the things I came to see? How can I best use my limited time to attain the benefits that I am seeking? Attending football games and concerts is much easier. Museum visiting places the responsibility for organizing the experience squarely on the individual Although the support personnel and the property itself and the amenities and the collections communicate to a visitor what the museum says about itself through its interpretation programs has the greatest role in shaping a visitor's experience. An orientation talk or film, docent-led tours, special exhibits, and site activations are among the interpretation programs that fulfill the promises that were made in the pre-visit messages. For many visitors, and this is a very important point, for many visitors, these interpretation programs are directional guideposts and are perceived as the museum's principal product. Therefore, it is important not only that pre-visit and interpretation messages be consistent with each other, but also that visitors are perceiving the interpretation messages in the same way the museum intended that they would. If they are not, what visitors tell their friends is almost certain to produce pre-visit expectations that cannot be fulfilled on site. Most museums do not have any idea of the impressions that they are making upon their visitors, and they often feel helpless if they learn that they are not making the impressions that they intended to. Yet, the procedure for improving such situations can easily be implemented by any museum at practically no cost. The first step is to ask visitors to share their impressions with the museum, just as they will later with their friends. A survey card filled out by a random sample of visitors as they leave can be used to collect these impressions. It should ask how they learned about the museum and if that information was consistent with their visit experience. And it should ask for their positive and negative impressions of the museum personnel with whom they had contact, of the property itself, the amenities, the collections, and the interpretation. This visitor feedback should be reviewed carefully by the museum. Do problems cited by visitors require a clearer or more accurate pre-visit message, or a better on-site explanation of an existing program? Or are visitors telling you that on-site messages are not consistent with your stated purposes and changes are required? Sometimes when pre-visit misperceptions of satisfactory programs are involved, all that is needed is to correct marketing material or publicity releases. In these cases, visitor expectations are met when visitors correctly understand the program. Less frequently, new programs or even fundamental changes in operating policy may be required if the museum is to deliver what it intends to promise. In any case, visitor impressions should be factored into program planning and operating policy decisions. And before such changes are made, it should first be determined that the change will not only help the museum better achieve a desired purpose, but also will meet the criteria imposed by the museum's professional standards. This is another point I would like to emphasize. I'm not suggesting that a museum should be led by its market. I am suggesting a mutual accommodation between the standards and objectives of the museum and the needs and interests of its publics. One must be guided by common sense and good judgment in evaluating visitor impressions. And program and policy changes should be made only when there is significant reason to do so. A museum will not improve its position with the public by responding to every public whim. If a change is to be made, it should not be publicized to attract visitors until it is successfully implemented on site. In summary, this model which I have developed illustrates the process of marketing and promoting interpretive programs that we have been discussing. A museum's pre-visit messages consisting of its word-of-mouth publicity, media publicity, and marketing communication, create expectations that benefits can be attained through a museum visit. A museum's on-site messages, consisting of its support personnel, the property itself, the amenities, the collection, and the interpretation, either fall short of, meet, or exceed the visitor's expectations, thereby creating impressions. A visitor's impressions, when communicated by word-of-mouth publicity, are very influential in determining whether other people will visit, and it will help determine what expectations they will bring with them to the museum. A museum can survey a random sample of its visitors when they leave to collect their impressions. These should be evaluated and factored into program planning and operating procedures and policies. After changes are successfully made, they can be publicized through the media and the museum's own marketing materials. By continuously monitoring this process and taking action where necessary to assure pre-visit and on-site message consistency, a museum can enjoy a stable public image that will attract visitors and other forms of support. In conclusion, I recommend that you answer several questions about your museum. Is what you wish to say consistent with reality? Is what the media is saying about your museum consistent with what you intend to say? Do you know what visitors are expecting when they arrive? Do you know what their impressions are when they leave? Are your museum's pre-visit and on-site messages consistent? Do you factor the opinions of your constituents into your operating procedures and policies? Do you make sure changes and new programs are working properly before you publicize them to attract visitors? Whether a person will visit your museum or support it in other ways depends upon what people are saying about it.